Okay, everyone, here is the demo on how to create your slab for your Sgraffito mask and placing it on top of your newspaper mold. So you're going to start with about 2.5 maybe inches of clay straight off the top of the bag. You want to make sure that you have enough clay that you're going to be able to use for the entire mold shape and for your mask. So you want to keep referencing what you're going to be eventually putting it on top of. I'm going to pound out with the palm of my hand the clay and keep flipping over each time I make a full pass. It's probably 9 or 10 hits on one side and then flipping it over. I'm trying to make sure I stretch it out from left to right, so across the mat a little bit or across the canvas a little bit before I start to really start stretching it out with the rolling pin. I want to guarantee that the width of the actual slab is going to be already taken care of before I need to roll it out with the rolling pin. So I'm just kind of slapping it down onto the table a little bit more to help stretch it out, and I'm still working side to side to keep that slab from getting too narrow. I want to make sure it's going to be wide enough for everything I'm going to need once I start rolling it out with the rolling pin and with the sticks. Use your sticks as a guide. Make sure your rolling pin is nice and clean, and make sure you push the clay out and back and then lift it off the canvas so it stretches out again. Work on this a couple times, flip over the piece of clay and do it again. Notice I'm only rolling it out up and down. I'm not crossing over because I want to make sure that the rolling pin still stays on top of those sticks. I'm going to maybe need to taper the sticks in a little bit at the bottom so I can keep it close to the rolling pin, and then make sure I do it again on the other side as well. This is the same technique, just working with a different size slab as we did for our slab created mugs. Just want to get really close to the same thickness on both sides without dropping into the clay and making a thin spot. It's okay if the clay is a little bit thicker than the sticks. You're working on a slab for a mold, and so it will be helpful if the clay was a little bit thicker if you needed to do it that way. So last couple passes, just very carefully working on the surface a little bit, and then I'm changing just a little bit of the angle to help stretch out a little bit more of the clay, and making sure I have plenty of clay around the entire outside of my mold before I start doing anything else. Take some of the excess clay that's way out on the edges and just hydrate it again and put it back in the bag. Don't leave it out. And then start planning for transferring this slab to the mold. You want to make sure you first wipe it clean with a damp sponge and then compress it with the metal rib. You're doing this because it'll strengthen the clay and make for a nice clean surface to start with. This side of the slab will end up being the bottom of the slab and going to be resting up against the mold. So I'm going to do this side only, and then I'm going to do the rest of the smoothing and the process of cleaning off the other side of the slab once it's on top of the mold. So I'm going to get my hands cleaned off. Things are ready for the actual mold, and then I have to prep the mold to make sure that the slab doesn't get stuck and get ruined by being on top of this paper mold. Get a board. If you don't have a board, you can probably use a piece of cardboard or a cardboard box that you flattened into something that's similar to a board. You're going to put your mold on top of the board, and then you're going to put some plastic on top of the mold so it doesn't get hydrated by the clay. Carefully lay the slab back over the top of it. Notice how I flipped it. And now I'm just going to adjust the slab very lightly. I don't grab the clay. I kind of lightly move the clay around, and now I'm just adjusting the way that the slab is resting on top of the mold. And you can start to see the clay is starting to take shape. And now it's mainly the whole point of this is trying to make sure that you have a nice smooth transition around your mold without any major dents or any kind of major issues with the clay getting transferred over on top of the mold. I don't use my fingertips. I'm using the palm of my hand most of the time, or the edges of my hand, and I don't want to be leaving any dents or any kind of imperfections into the surface of this slab. Now I'm going to wipe it all down carefully, lightly with a sponge, and I'm just trying to define the actual shape of my clay on top of that mold. So I don't want to press too hard onto the corners or into the edges where they transition from paper mold to the tabletop or to the board. I don't want to make any really deep like grooves or anything like that in the clay, because that'll kind of ruin your opportunity to try to make adjustments as you start going along with the technique here. Use the back side of the rib, the straight edge around the curved parts, so you can bend it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the round side of the actual mold, or of the actual rib, to kind of get through all around the edges and making sure you have a nice smooth transition. If you accidentally dig into the clay a little bit, you just have to work on that spot a little bit more to help remove some of those grooves, like right there on the left side. So eventually you'll start to slowly work the clay back and forth, and gently, very gently, just kind of smooth out the clay until you see a nice transition between the mold and the table or the board where you're working with. I'm going to leave a lot of this clay around the outside of the mold for a while now, because I might have some other features that I want to use that clay for. Maybe something that's going to be above the head, or ear features or something like that that you might want to have sticking off the side of the molds. And so you don't want to get rid of all that clay right off the bat. You want to leave it on there so you can plan ahead and maybe decide what you want to do a little bit later when you start actually building off the surface here. So now I'm just very carefully kind of going over the top surface again, making sure I compress the clay without a lot of pressure, just enough pressure to kind of get it smoothed out so it starts to take shape. And then I'm just going to work on that transition again between the table or the board and the mold itself. Finish it off with your thumb very lightly, just smooth it out with your thumb. Kind of blend that clay back and forth a little bit. Seems to be the best way of actually making sure that you have a nice smooth surface. Sometimes the ribs will leave little marks here and there, but your thumb is a great way to finish off the surface. Once you're done smoothing it out, you can let that sit in the bag until you're ready to use it again. Fold the rest of the excess of the bag over the top of it, and then find another bag, and you're going to put the entire thing inside it. So this is important because you might have openings like you see right there. You can't just leave the bag like that, or else the slab will dry out unevenly. So you want to preserve the whole thing by getting a big enough bag where you can put the board inside with your mold and your clay, and then tuck it all in underneath the board. And that's it. All right, good luck. Thanks.